Reverend Pamela Castellanos, Associate Pastor of the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church in historic Berkeley. Welcome, Pastor. And please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. O Lord our God, how mighty and how excellent is your name. You are our creator and the sustainer of all heaven and earth. We recognize your presence and acknowledge you as the one who guides and leads us through perilous times. We pray a special blessing on the lives of those whom you have set in position to make decisions for the betterment and oversight of our city. We thank you and pray for our mayor, city council members, city officials, city workers, first responders, the homeless population, our children, and our educators. And we pray for all of those who are under the sound of my voice. We pray for our city leaders as they remain faithful, steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the concerns of our citizens within the city of Norfolk. We pray tonight that you would strengthen and guide our city leaders as they thrust forward into the next phase of the developmental decisions for our city. Bless these your people. This is my humble and sincere prayer in your wonderful and matchless name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is.
I know.
Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mrs. Doyle?
Here?
Mrs. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. McClellan?
Here.
Mr. Riddick?
Here.
Mr. Smeagol?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. Alexander?
Here, the motion is to excuse Councilwoman Graves.
Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smeagol?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. The motion is to dispense with the reading of the minutes of our previous meeting.
Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smeagol?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution certified in the closed meeting.
I have a resolution certifying a closed meeting of the Council of the City of Norfolk in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Adopt the resolution. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smeagol?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Good evening. For the benefit of those who do not regularly attend our council meeting, the procedures that we will take up tonight is first, take up our ceremony items. Next, we'll take up the public hearings, then the consent agenda, which will be voted on in a block. If any member of the council or the public wishes to discuss an item, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Following the consent agenda, we'll take up our regular agenda items in the order as they appear on the docket. Upon completion of the agenda, we will then take up any new business that come before the council. To address the council, you should have registered to speak in the lobby of the council prior to 6:50. When your name is called, please come to the podium, state your name and your address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Mr. Clerk, IB1.
Yes, the next item is the receipt of bids pursuant to invitation for bids and notice of public hearing scheduled this day pursuant to state law, public notice having been inserted in the local press by the city clerk to accept bids for a wireless facilities franchise agreement with a term of 10 years with up to 3 renewal terms of 5 years each in the city's right-of-way, subject to certain terms and conditions.
How many bids have been received?
We have one bid.
Please mark the bid and mark it for identification and read it.
Grantees shall pay the city an annual user fee for each small cell facility installed in the public ways of the city. The amount of the annual user fee shall be $1,000 for any small cell facility or wireless facility mounted on a wireless support structure or utility pole at or below 50 feet in total height, or $1,500 for any small cell facility or wireless facility mounted on a wireless support structure or utility pole above 50 feet in height. And C, $1 per square foot for any other associated equipment or shelter mounted on the ground. The term of this franchise shall be for a period of 10 years from the effective date. Upon expiration of this date, the grantee shall have the option to renew the agreement for up to 3 years of a 5 years each for the franchise agreement containing substantially similar terms. However, any such renewal franchise agreement shall be subject to the approval of City Council through a duly adopted ordinance. Grantee will pay the city the sum of $1,000 for the administrative costs and expenses incurred by the city related to the grant of this franchise. Upon execution of the agreement by both parties, the administrative shall be paid to the city within 14 days a fee. Within 180 days of following written notice from the city, grantee shall temporarily or permanently remove, relocate, change, or alter the position of any wireless support structure, wireless facility, or small cell facility within the public right-of-ways at grantee's expense whenever the city shall have determined that such removal, relocation, change, or alteration is rather reasonably necessary for A, construction, repair, maintenance, or installation of any city facilities or other public improvement in or upon the public ways. B, the operations of the city or other governmental entity in or upon the public ways. Grantee shall, at its expense, obtain and maintain during the life of this agreement the insurance and bond required by this agreement. Any required insurance and bond shall be effective prior to the beginning of any work by grantee within the city.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any additional bids offered? If there are no additional bids offered, I declare the bidding closed. Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard on this matter? If there's no member of the public who wishes to be heard on this matter, I declare the public hearing closed. Is there a recommendation from the city staff regarding the bid received from Cox Wireless Access LLC?
Yes, sir. City staff recommends that the bid by Cox Wireless Access LLC be reviewed by city staff and a recommendation be made to council at your March 5, 2019 meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Is there a motion to continue this matter until the next meeting of the City Council of Norfolk on March 5th, 2019, to receive the recommendation of the city staff and to consider the bid from Cox Wireless Access LLC?
I so move.
I second the motion.
Is there any further discussion? If not, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
The motion's continued to March 5th. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. Mr. Clerk, PH1.
Public hearing 1 scheduled this day under the state law. Public notice having been inserted in the local press by the city clerk to hear comments on approving a lease agreement with Copy Connection LLC as leasing for the property known as 240 East Main Street.
Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
I have an ordinance approving a lease agreement with Copy Connection LLC as leasing for the property known as 240 East Main Street in the city of Norfolk. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance. Adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Graves? Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
She called in. Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. Mr. Clerk, PH2.
Public 2 scheduled this day under the state law. Public notice having been inserted in the local press by the city clerk on the application of Galaxy NC LLC to close, vacate, and discontinue the southeast corner of the intersection of Doswell Street and Pecan Point Road.
Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Have an ordinance closing, vacating, and discontinuing a portion of Pecan Point Road and the southern 10-foot portion of a 20-foot lane and authorizing the conveyance of any interest the city may have in the said portion of the street and lane, conditioned upon payment to the city of a sum of up to $7,200.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Dispense with the charter requirement for read the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
No.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas,
Aye.
Mr. Alexander.
Aye. Mr. Clerk, PH3.
Public hearing 3 scheduled this day under the state law. Public notice having been inserted in the local press by the city clerk on the application of the City Planning Commission for a zoning text amendment to create the downtown St. Paul's zoning district.
Mr. George, thank you. I have several, we have one person to sign up to speak on this matter, but there are others who signed up in the new business. And what I'm going to do is to get you to speak on this issue, because I think that's what you indicated, that you're here for, to speak on this issue? Or do you want to wait until the end of and speak on the new business?
We can, residents, are we ready to speak on this?
Okay, all right, so I will have you to speak, but you're all signed up on the new business, but you indicated in your remarks that you were here for St. Paul, so I'll just make that clerical correction for you. Is that okay? That's fine. You're welcome. All right, George.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Manager. This application is an application by the Planning Commission to create the downtown St. Paul's zoning district. It's important to note that while the ordinance creates a zoning district, it does not rezone any property. The zoning district will then be applied on an individual application to property in the St. Paul's area. The St. Paul's area currently being defined as being south of Brambleton, north of City Hall, east of St. Paul's Boulevard, and west of Tidewater Drive. In terms of the requirements, the basic concept for this district is that the area between St. Paul's Boulevard and Church Street is similar in context to the downtown, and so would be an extension of the existing mixed-use downtown approach, which would provide a mid-rise, mixed-use, mixed-income area, while the area between Church Street and Tidewater Drive is much more like the Freemason area, so it would be a lower-rise, residentially centric area with similar parking standards as Freemason, although without the historic district requirements. This is intended to be extremely flexible, and the way it's applied is that each individual application would have to come before the Planning Commission and City Council, as well as, because of the way the rules are written in the zoning ordinance, extensive public input through neighborhoods before it could ever get to either of the bodies. And so each individual application, each individual building would be individually reviewed on a case-by-case basis by this body as well as the Planning Commission, and there would be extensive opportunities for public input for each of those. Mr. Mayor, I'll be glad to answer any other questions that you or council may have.
Thank you, George. Thank you. The first person to sign up to speak on PH3 is Alton Robinson. He actually signed up to speak on this matter. I did see Alton is. There you are. Come on. You want to speak on this issue, or you want to speak on a new business?
Are they doing it now, or are they doing it
So let me make sure we're clear. If you want to speak on this ordinance, then I'm going to keep everyone in line to speak on what Mr. Homewood just expressed. But if you're here to speak on a new business and speak generally about St. Paul's, then you need to wait until new business.
There will be new business.
Thank you, sir. Just want to make sure we're clear.
I choose to speak on this.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And you signed up twice, so you can speak both times.
Thank you. How everybody doing?
Fine.
Great. The only concern, my name is Alton Robinson, my address is 314 West 27th Street. Now, the only concern I have is that I've been tracking this St. Paul quadrant deal for quite some time. And I went back and I looked at the Planning Commission YouTube when they unanimously approved this. And what was interesting to me is that Ms. Susan Pollock Hart presented it to the Planning Commission as a recommendation. So what I'm saying is that the recommendation came from the Planning Commission to be brought to the City Council. The City Council appoints the Planning Commission. So I'm kind of lost in that process and trying to understand that. Also, I was at a meeting last Tuesday. Councilman Ritter was there, and he had asked about could they have time for citizens to be engaged, but there was no time for the citizens. But in the beginning of this process, the council here, and I'm only here because you all asked me to hold you all accountable. And as a friend, I think that's what I would do, and that's what I'm doing. And so now there's a St. Paul's Advisory Committee, and I really found it strange that Mr. Earl Fraley made a decision on this during planning, and he sits on the advisory committee. And it says here in the planning, it's hard to understand the planning because they have 137 pages. I read through 137 pages. Then I found out that there's another plan with 66 pages. And so I had to read through all that just to find out about this advisory, St. Paul Advisory Committee, which states that the St. Paul Advisory Committee says will serve as community advocates for this process. So how do you do that? How do you double dip in this process and serve as an advocate for the citizens and then turn around and unanimously vote on something that was taking place? And if you go and look on YouTube, none of the residents was present. Not one resident was present. And you all asked me to hold you accountable. For 2 years, I didn't come down here. I just sat back, read, and researched and waited. So now I see that many of you all ran your campaign on transparency, and you ran your campaign on accountability. And not to say that anyone on council is at fault, but I would just to say that you all would read through this stuff and find out what's going on. Because I don't believe everybody's really reading what's going on. And I still don't understand how somebody can represent the people and the city of Norfolk at the same time.
Thank you very much.
And not be biased.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
So I think it's Mr. Thomas and I and the mayor previously all served on the Planning Commission, and I just wanted to address that. So the Planning Department, city staff, makes a recommendation to the Planning Commission, who is appointed by council. They can choose to vote up or down on that regardless. Ultimately, though, then that comes to the city council, and we make the decision. So there's a couple different times for citizen input, both at the Planning Commission, and in my experience, sometimes we had citizens show up at both, sometimes just Planning Commission, sometimes just City Council, depending on the issue as well. But I don't know that there's necessarily a sort of a double dip. I assume that Mr. Fraley, as the chair of the Planning Commission, serves on the St. Paul's Advisory Board because he has that expertise. But I'm not involved in that piece of it. But does that help?
Yeah, well, the meeting was on
Explain.
January the 24th. So this was some time ago.
Well, the Planning Commission typically votes a month in advance of when we will receive
Right.
something for council. So that's the advisory committee that deals with that.
But the citizens should have been present. That's what I think. I think it's a good thing because you all promised them that. Y'all promised that y'all was going to keep them in the
And
loop.
citizens are able to come to that, and there's the YouTube video as well, as you mentioned as well, and there should have been notification for that and sent to the citizens. So I'm not aware of that
Yeah,
one, so
right,
I
yeah.
apologize. But I just wanted to, people don't understand that process. It's complicated, as you note, so I just thought it might be helpful for you and others who might be listening what the sort of differentiation of that would be.
All right, well, thank you so very much.
All right. Ms. Johnson.
Yes, I just wanted to know, as part of the advisory committee, were the residents notified?
That's a good question. The Planning Commission.
This ordinance?
So
wait a minute.
the advisory committee is a standing meeting, right? And we've got the newsletter that goes out to the residents. And so we announce those meetings. We talk about what happened in those meetings. You all talked at your retreat about perhaps adding a public comment period for this very issue, adding a public comment period to those
Adding it,
meetings.
yeah.
So we
Which would happen in
can
the
always
future.
do better with communication, but we are notifying folks at this point in time when those meetings are taking place.
So, Mr. Manager, let me just be clear what we're doing tonight, because I think there may be some confusion what Mr. Homewood presented. This ordinance is a continuation of several things. One, in 2014, the city and NRHA submitted to HUD the St. Paul's Transformation Plan in 2014. And in that descriptive, it talked about provide more appropriate street width, realign Church Street, replace stormwater and infrastructure systems as needed, create a greenway and blueway with recreational opportunities, school reorganization, and create new housing options and choices for Tidewater Gardens residents. In the fall of 2018, we submitted for the Choice Neighborhood Grant. And again, that descriptive lays out about the things that you've heard in the Choice Neighborhood application. And again, it talks about schools and historic places, mixed use, mixed income district, national registered historic places and how they will be treated, about schools, consolidation or improving Ruffina and Booker T. Washington replacement. And so what Mr. Homewood presented is the ordinance as relates to the St. Paul's transformation plan. However, he made it very clear, this does not, what we voted on tonight does not move anyone, does not rezone any parcel, does not sell any parcel of land. So this started in 2014. And so I just want to make sure that you're clear on that. Mr. Homewood, did I miss anything or you want to add anything?
No, sir, you've got it.
All right, okay. All right, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, Mr. President, I have an ordinance to amend the Norfolk zoning ordinance so as to create a new zoning district known as the Downtown St. Paul's District. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Grave? Ms. Johnson?
Not here. Ms. Johnson, aye.
Ms. McClellan?
I vote aye, but I just want to make sure that in the future, when we have anything at the Planning Commission, that in advance that the advisory committee receives notification of it and is asked for input as well. That may have happened, I don't know, but obviously there seems to be some confusion, and so in the future, when we have a planning or zoning or anything along those lines, we need to over-communicate. So, and I think we all said that at the meeting at retreat, but aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smeagol?
And just real quick, and I'm sorry about my voice. I've been getting sick lately. I might have gotten Angela sick, right?
Say that.
But we had a lively discussion about this on Saturday at our retreat, and I know Alton, my friend, where are you, Alton? I didn't see you there, but and there was no article written in the newspaper about that discussion. There was an article written actually the night before. I think did it come out that day?
Sunday.
Came out, actually posted online while you were meeting.
Right, while we were meeting, and it allowed the opportunity for many of us to express some concerns that we had, to get some clarification on things. I quite frankly said, to the manager that I feel completely out of the loop on everything that's happened in St. Paul's, and that this is a council effort, and we should all be involved in it. It shouldn't just be our representatives that represent that ward that are involved. And so there was a great discussion, which it wasn't in the newspaper, so nobody's reported about it. I guess minutes will be available to the citizens soon, Alan. That if you want to look at that, and you can see where many of us are standing on this issue, and what we believe and where we should go with this. We've asked for actually invitations to come to the advisory meeting. I didn't even know when they were meeting. I'd like to show up to some of them and also hear from citizens as well. And so there was a big conversation about communication there that I wish everybody who's here could have heard that, so that you understand that we realize that there is some communication issues, and we want to get better at that. So hopefully an article will be written on that. What was discussed as a follow-up to the original article, so that you can see where some of us are with this and how passionate we are about making sure that everybody knows what's going on. Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. Mr. Clerk, C1 through C8 will be considered in a block.
What about 4? I'd like to ask a question
All right,
about 4.
pull C4 out of the block.
Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinances and adopt the consent agenda except C4. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick.
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas,
Aye.
Mr. Alexander.
Aye. Mr. Clerk, C4.
My question about C4, is this Aldi, the grocery store, or some club named Aldi? Grocery store, okay. I vote aye.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
I have an ordinance granting a conditional use permit authorizing the sale of alcoholic beverages for off-premises consumption at an establishment named Aldi on property located at 730 West 21st Street. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. Mr. Clerk, R1.
R1 is an ordinance granting a conditional use permit to authorize the operation of a nightclub named Granny's Country Cooking on property located at 628 35th Street, Suite 636A and 636B. This item was continued generally at a meeting of July 24th, 2018, and passed by at a meeting of January 8th, 2019, and Planning Commission recommends denial by 5-0.
All right, George or Susan, anyone want to bring us up to speed?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, unfortunately, I'm here to report to you that the direction that you all gave us, we were not able to fulfill. You all left the meeting in January asking us to see if we could work out a compromise between the applicant and the neighborhood, and unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, members of council, we were not able to do that. And so the application is as it stood when it came to in January. If you all have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
I do.
All right, Ms.
Mr.
Johnson.
Mayor.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me, Mr. Homewood, why a compromise could not be worked out with the applicant and the community?
So, and I'm going to make several leaps of faith here, Mrs. Johnson, but
Thank you.
the issue for the neighborhood is the operational characteristics that are of concern, and particularly what they perceive to be the negative externality that's associated with some of the entertainment options at Granny's. The issue for the applicants is the ability to be able to schedule and operate entertainment in a way that fulfills the need of their bottom line, frankly, and be able to keep the business viable. The applicant was willing to accept an 18-month sunset provision in the ordinance that provides the opportunity for entertainment that includes a disc jockey and a dance floor and late night. The neighborhood, or at least the neighborhood leadership, didn't believe that alone satisfied the neighborhood concern of the operational characteristics. I think that I don't really want to speak for the neighborhood. I can't, but my sense is that they were hoping for some sort of limit on the number of weekends or the number of days during a period of time where the applicant would have a disc jockey and dance.
George, I thought they just wanted it on Wednesday, or was it several days? Maybe I'm mistaken.
Mr. Riddick, that may well be their current operating model, but it was not a limit that was offered to say that it will only be on Wednesdays, or will only be on Saturdays, or it will be on Wednesdays and 4 weekends a year. I mean, none of those were brought up. I mean, right now it's the opportunity for any kind of entertainment exists for any day. And I think, when the applicant speaks, she'll be able to explain that she believes that really is critical to being able to operate the business at a profit.
All right,
Okay,
Mr. Smigiel.
Under the current allowance, what they're allowed to do under the current zoning and they have a special exception.
They do.
Are they allowed to apply for special events at a limited amount, like most places that close early hours can do, at a certain limit per year?
There is a bit of a disagreement amongst us as to whether or not the way the language that we currently have written permits that. But it's my opinion that yes, they do have that opportunity, and that we would consider a request that the limit is, as you know, Mr. Smeagol, is 4 times a year.
Okay.
All right.
The business association, what's their position?
I did not meet with the business association, so I can't characterize that, sir. I apologize.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Mr. Homewood, stay close.
Thank you.
Kenita Baker. Ms. Baker, you and Mr. Baker are the applicants.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh. How you doing? My name is Kenita Baker, 636 West 35th Street. My main concern why I'm here today is just to clear up on this record these lies that was brought before you guys, as well as with the city council, the planning or whatever planning. When Mr. Homewood just came up here and said that we have any type of proposals out there, we threw out so many proposals ever since 2017 about changing our time. Right now, we can operate from 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. We don't do that. And we told them that we would just do Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Nobody threw that under the rug. Mr. Homewood also came up here and lied on the record this past about Mr. Speaker asked this man, have the Bakers came to any type of agreement far as a proposal. He stated no. When we did, we sat with Mr. Bernie Pisco on this issue, July of this year, stated all these accusations. They lied on the record. Max Simon lied on the record about shootings at my establishment when you had the chief of police say won't no violence, no act of violence was at my establishment. I have to go to Walmart, explain to people that I haven't had a shooting at my establishment. Do you know how that make me feel? When I can't even step outside of my establishment and go grocery shopping for my family without somebody questioning me about a shooting that they lied on the record about. Now, I'm just here just to clear up all the lies. I don't even want to go into depth about your planning and how they came up with all these lies. I think it's just a conflict of interest because you have the Civic League, which you have Susan Polar as an active member of the Civic League. I feel like it's a conflict of interest. I'm not here to bash nobody, but I just needed to get that off my chest because I'm tired of all the lies. All the lies. There's too many lies being told about my establishment like it's a bad establishment. Everybody is talking about all these bad things, but don't talk about the good things or how grannies give back when nobody else give back. Nobody else give back, but grannies do. Grannies have fed over 500 and some people every Thanksgiving.
Ms. Baker, let me ask you a couple of questions. So you're proposing Wednesday and Friday and Saturday.
Yes.
And what are your current operating hours, or what are you permitted to do now under your?
I can do 11 to 2 o'clock in the morning. I can have a band. Do y'all know that I can have a band there and bang it out? Boom, 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 a band.
Yeah, Ms. We're familiar with what you can have, but I'm trying to get to what you want. All right. So right now you can operate how many days a week?
7.
I can operate out 7 days a week, 11 to 2.
11 a.m. to 2 a.m.
Yes.
All right. And you're proposing to go only Wednesdays and Fridays and Saturday? And what hours are you proposing to operate?
To 12.
To 12, okay?
To 12.
All right.
That's normal restaurant hours, 11
And,
to 11.
and you still want to have the karaoke?
Yes, I want to have everything that they have already given me. The only thing I'm standing up here
Well,
in
let's-
front of you guys is a DJ.
Let me just say it, okay?
Mhm.
Karaoke, a four-piece band,
Yes,
poetry,
yes.
and now you want to add a
Poetry, spoken
a
word,
a comedian.
spoken word, fashion show, everything. Everything that we can have far as dealing with a band, poetry, spoken word, comedy, fashion show.
I got it. Okay. All right. All right. Any questions for Ms. Baker? Mr. Riddick?
You know, when this facility first opened,
Yeah, the Friday service is 2 o'clock. That's the weekend.
yeah, when the facility first opened, we had Don Hester, Paul Frame, Bockley Wynn. So many people on this council supported it, and they were doing very well. And so I was really surprised when this issue came up about a DJ. I mean, just a DJ. When the business association, from what I understand, supports the operation, the only other food service place on the block is Crocus Spot, and they support it. And so it's just, you know, and I do see some, you know, maybe you asked him, Mr. Mayor, questions, so I don't have any questions. That was just some statements that I want to make. Thank you.
All right. Randy Baker, next speaker.
Randy Baker, 636 West 35th Street. I just want to add on to what my wife was just speaking on about, you know, the slander we've been having to go through. The young man, Miss Johnson, just asked him a question about the compromise. We met with Mrs. Graves and Mrs. Dole, planning, whoever, city attorney, and they brought up the Sunrise, but they asked us if the Civic League come back with something, you know, will we be open to it? We was like, yes. Okay, when they met with the Civic League, as I was told, that they came with a letter, a 3-page letter saying that it's no compromise. They didn't want to compromise. Basically, we just don't want it, you know. And if we go back to the history on this, you know, every planning commission hearing, it was brought forth to them that we had 30-some infractions, 3 shootings. Okay, then we go to the forum. The planning committee, that same presentation be presented to y'all. Grant has had these shootings, these infractions. So when we meet with the city attorney and whoever we have to meet with, we come to find out, because we had to do our own investigation and present the evidence, that was no shootings at Grant's. We haven't had no infractions. So I'm just confused on why now when we come in front of y'all, no one is saying, okay, the things that we told y'all before about the infractions and the shootings, that was a mistake on us. You know, they didn't have any infractions. They didn't have any shootings. And then, as y'all being leaders of the city, asking the questions on, well, how did that get in their jacket? Who put that in there? Yeah. You know, why did somebody accuse them of these things and nobody's questioning it? You know, I mean, I'm just confused on that because, you know, we know the Civic League is against it, okay? But when the Civic League saying they're against it, they're gonna be like, well, why the Civic League against it? It's because they had these shootings and these infractions. But now they don't have these shootings and these infractions. So now why is the Civic League against it? Because it's no reason. It's, you know what I mean? We could go up here, I could go and point the fingers on why the reasons are, because, you know, it's just an individual. But it's we haven't had these incidents. We didn't have these incidents that they're saying that we had. I'm just confused, and I just would like somebody to look into that and discipline whoever did that.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. All right. Okay, next we have Mr. Charles Johnson. Mr. Johnson, Charles Johnson is here? Yes, sir. Mr. Johnson, please come forward. President of the Park Place Civic League.
Good evening. My name is Charles Johnson. I live at 3226 on Alejandro Avenue. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, city manager, city attorney, city clerk. Tonight, I'm speaking as the president of the Park Place Civic League, and I'm going to summarize a letter that was submitted to planning, to the Planning Commission, and also submitted to the council back in January 7th of this year. The Park Place Civic League affirms that its response at the original date that we will not support the conditional use permit for the Rosner Lounge, once known as Granny's Country Kitchen. The reason why we do not support or approve of this conditional use permit is because of precedent. We are concerned that we are a community that focuses on bringing businesses into our community. Just this past month, 5 new businesses have arrived in the Park Place Civic League area. Prior to that time, we had several businesses that are doing very well. We've had development in the form of single detached housing. We've had new apartments to come in. Everything is working. We believe in a strong economy for our community. We are not anti-business, but what we are opposed to, if you allow this conditional use permit to be approved, you are going to be supporting a precedent of an organization, a business, violating code prior to this time and allowing them to move on. What is that saying to new businesses coming into our community? In other words, the Civic League feels that if you set this precedent, it's not just going to affect the community of Park Place, it's going to affect the city of Norfolk. The modification of this conditional use permit would not contribute to our healthy neighborhood enterprise concept. And that concept is that we believe in code compliance for stabilization. We believe in zero tolerance for code violations. And because of this, this decision is unanimous by the Park Place Civic League Board, by the Park Place Civic League Zoning and Improvement Committee, and by the majority of the Park Place Civic League members, several times going back 2 years. Tonight, President, I have some of the members of the Park Place Civic League Board with me, with Park Place Civic League Zoning and Improvement Committee, and some members of the Civic League here. And would you please stand? These are several of the people who have heard this issue several different times over the past 2.5 years. At this time, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we hope that you will support our position that the approval of this conditional use permit would be congruent with our vision of the Park Place Civic League, that we will be a healthy neighborhood composed of East Kensington, Old Dominion Place, Virginia Place, and Park Place.
Thank you so much. Therese Lindquist. Ms. Lindquist.
Good evening, Therese Lundquist, 2901 Granby Street. I have lived in Greater Park Place for about 10 years. I have also served as Park Place Civic League president during 2010 to 2012. I am presently on the Zoning and Improvements Committee. And I was present at the Civic League meeting when Randy Baker spoke before the body. And he presented the House of Blues as a entertainment establishment that would have like a 4-member live band, karaoke, and also like poetry reading and comedy performances. And they were aiming the establishment to an older crowd, He also mentioned that due to the limited parking on 35th Street, that he was working with James Monroe School and the Park Place Neighborhood Center to provide some type of valet parking so that the streets on 35th Street wouldn't be riddled with traffic and driveways blocked. What we got was something completely different. We got a DJ-driven nightclub. We understood at that point that they were operating illegally, which I think has not even been mentioned here this evening. And we had a great deal of problems that ensued because of that. Shooting or no shooting, there's been dysfunction. Every time that there's a DJ there, there's been lewd behavior, there's been disorderly conduct. I was at the Planning Commission meeting in September of 2017 where we had residents speak about some of the behavior that they have witnessed. We actually had police officers, I believe Lieutenant Gibbs and our community resource officer, speak before the commission and talk about additional resources that had to go to grannies when they operated with a DJ. So I am here wholeheartedly speaking in opposition to this. We support businesses in Greater Park Place. We have wonderful things happening, but I think we have a business that has deliberately and knowingly continued to operate with a DJ, knowing that they are working outside the parameters of their special permit. I think that to give them this is to award this type of behavior throughout the city of Norfolk. So I'm asking for the council to no longer delay this decision that's been going on for since 2017. And I'm also asking for council to vote in opposition to this evening. And I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Jamie Jackson.
Good afternoon, members of the council, Mr. Mayor. My name is Jamie Jackson. I live at 618 West 28th Street. I am in opposition of the requested amendment to Rosna's CUP. This week on my block, and I apologize for the analogy in advance, but this week on my block and neighboring blocks, the city of Norfolk did street paving. Signs were posted notifying residents who lived and or worked within those blocks that they needed to move their cars so that the city could provide a benefit, which was a beautifully paved street in Park Place. And if the residents, business owners, and workers did not relocate their cars, they could be towed. As a resident, businesses should also honor the same commitment of compliance when the city provides the benefit of a CUP or a conditional use permit. And if they are not in compliance, that permit should not be expanded, as in the case with this CUP. Similar to my car on the street, the city would not have paid to tow my car. As compliance to the current CUP is still an issue with residents in our community in Park Place, as promoted by Rosna itself through its outreach of the business over the past few months, even as of recent, I would request that this be denied. I do support the business, as I have patroned the business myself, but I do not support the expansion of this application, as the benefit, which is the CUP, should not be a reward of a business that is operating outside of what the business and the city and the residents have already agreed upon. Thank you for your time.
Lavette Bell.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
My name is Lavette Bell, and I'm a Park Place resident. I'm also a realtor, neighborhood realtor. When I purchased my home in 2008, my intentions were to move in, take care of my property, stay to myself, and mind my business, as I had always done. Shortly after moving in, I was approached by a few folks about joining a civic league, and they would invite me to the VEP meetings. For you that don't know, it's the vision engagement process. At first, I wasn't very receptive, but they didn't give up on me, and eventually I started attending, and I finally saw what they were trying to do. I also saw the value in being involved with the Civic League and the VEP, especially as a homeowner. Almost 11 years later, I am proud to be a part of a group of people that are committed to raising the standards of our neighborhood. There's a term that people in support of Granny's, aka Rosna, keep throwing around at these meetings and at the Civic League when the subject about a DJ, when the subject of a DJ comes up, and that is, this is Park Place. What do you expect? When I hear people say that, what I interpret is that you feel that you don't have to respect me, have to have respect for me or my property, because after all, I chose to live in Park Place. You have the right to break in my house and take my things I've worked hard to obtain because I live in Park Place. I should expect shootings, car break-ins, and robberies because I live in Park Place. I should be okay with people openly selling drugs, the drug houses, the rooming houses, because I live in Park Place. That it's okay to basically run amok because it's Park Place. Well, no one should be okay with this or expect these things just because they live in a particular neighborhood. However, I can tell you what I do expect. I expect to come home at the end of the day and find that my home hasn't been disturbed. I expect that when I check on my vacant listings, that the appliances and the copper are still there. I expect to not have stray bullets hitting my house. I expect the businesses to conduct their business and not be a threat to the work that we've done for the past 10 plus years. I expect the value of my home to increase and to be able to live in peace. For the record, I also support Granny's Rosna, the restaurant, and I support them having live entertainment, but I do not support them having a DJ. They are a Black business, and I understand the importance and the value of a Black business in a predominantly Black community. But like I said, I do not support them having a DJ. I feel the incidents that have happened are a threat to the work that we've done and are a perfect example of what we're trying to do away with. The shootings, the fighting, the loitering, the trash, etc. Every business has a right to make their money, but their right does not trump my rights as a resident.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michael J. Muhammad.
Good evening, Council. Michael J. Muhammad, 801 East 26th Street. You've heard a lot on this issue of grannies and the process. I think that one of the things that'll help is to take out antiquated thinking, and this is not an insult, as we develop an entertainment process for a ever-growing city. Particularly among the millennials, and this being a college town with 2 prestigious universities, the nightlife experience is something that people are drawn to. And to make it more attractive, safe, and vibrant, changes are necessary for the process and in the understanding of those who work in the various departments. And I think that breakdown is what helped get to this situation. As it pertains to grannies, it's unfortunate that this council has to move off of information provided oftentimes by the media, because we know that the Virginian pilot is not necessarily always correct. But as it's presented, this establishment is getting a negative image. As Councilman Riddick stated, many members of this council and city staff have enjoyed time there. In fact, members of this council have been present when there were DJs being used prior to them being notified that they were not allowed to have DJs. So we take issue with the fact that the woman said every time there's a DJ, there's an issue. This establishment is a family-owned business. They've used their own resources, no money from the city, no request for such, but they've done it on their own. They increased from a small takeout restaurant to a sit-down restaurant to a nightlife and restaurant entertainment establishment, and they did so every step of the way with the community in mind. this issue is bigger than just Granny's versus the Park Place Civic League, because as Mr. Riddick asked, they do have a letter of support from the Business Association of Park Place. And that was submitted to Mr. Greenwood and his staff. I don't know why he didn't know it was there. But this issue covers the entirety of 35th Street. So if you deny Granny's, you will also be denying the future of the Crocus Spot and the potential for a DJ and other businesses, as DJs are important in the landscape when it comes to marketing, advertisement, and drawing people in so that you are not dependent on chicken dinners to save your business or to pay your bills. It doesn't work like that. You all have given license to the Zobi restaurants, 5 in all, in one blanketed, if I may finish this point, in one blanketed vote. Marriott and others, there have been shootings and different violent issues at these other establishments.
Mr. Muhammad, I'm gonna bring it to a close, sir.
Thank you, sir. And you all have given them an opportunity. Norfolk is about opportunity. Give Granny's an opportunity, and then you all have in place that which you need to take away the license if they don't abide by what you've given them. Thank you.
Thank you. George, can you come back for, there's a few questions and discussion. We heard a lot about infractions and shootings and fightings and code violations and lewd behavior and disorderly conduct. Is that documented? Is that supported by fact?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the information that finds its way into staff reports comes from the Norfolk Police Department incident reports that we have access to and that are provided to us. We don't independently, as planners, go out and determine precisely what has happened and how it happened, but the information that we presented to Planning Commission and to City Council comes from the incident reports we received from the Police Department. With respect to one of the questions that came up was in one of our staff reports early on. The statement was made that Granny's had their ABC license revoked.
Mayor.
Yeah. So
but that was
George.
that was
Can you
not
speak
true.
for a minute? So we will have civility in this chamber. Can't have outbursts. Please give Mr. Homewood the same courtesy and respect that we have shown those who have spoken before. Mr. Homewood, you may continue.
So the information on the revocation of the ABC license, it turned out that was a bit of a misstatement, that rather than having the license revoked, there is an opportunity to pay a greater fine and keep your license, which is what the establishment did. But there was, in fact, an ABC violation severe enough for the ABC folks to take some action.
Yeah. So, Mr. Homewood, last question. So we heard the nights that they had a DJ, that there was disorderly conduct, lewd behavior, and other illegal activities, shootings and fightings. Do we have anything to support that?
We have the testimony of neighbors in the neighborhood to that effect, and as well as the police reports that we had available to us.
So do we have police reports to support that?
We have police reports and we have reports from the neighborhood. I cannot stand up here and tell you that they absolutely dovetail in all cases.
Thank you, sir. All right. Ms. McClellan, and Ms. Doyle, and Mr. Riddick.
No, that's fine.
No, I think we need to move forward and vote on this.
Okay, Mr. Riddick?
You know, when I first became an adult, I lived initially at 847 West 35th Street and then 703 West 29th Street. And initially, the neighborhood had a hardware store. The Roslyn was still there as a movie theater, had a bank, drugstore, Chinese laundry. Overton's had a market at 35th and College. Well, in the mid-70s, Park Place was besieged by drugs. and the community, actually went down to the pits. But because of the work of the Civic League and other organizations, it rebounded. When Granny's opened up, as I said earlier, it had the support of Paul Frame, Barkley Wynn, Don Hester. A couple of them had their victory parties there. And I just hate to see this particular company go out like that. We had another issue at one time before, and it seemed to me that if they had tried to, and when I say they, I mean the two parties that wanted to, make a compromise, if Granny's would come back and say, listen, we'll be responsible for anything that happens within 1,000 feet of our restaurant in any direction. We'll be responsible for removing any litter within 1,000 feet of any direction of our facility. We'd have a DJ only on Fridays for 10 months just to see if we have any problems. And if in that 10-month period of time there are some drastic problems, then that conditional use permit would be withdrawn. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, you had a shooting at Scotty Quicks. You haven't heard a thing about that. Nothing. And when it comes to our African American restaurants, and I hate to make this thing a racial thing, but when it comes to our African American restaurants, we are held to a higher standard. We had a fella who had a place down on Plume Street. One black man owned $1 million piece of property on Plume Street. And the forces got rid of him. There are some forces that used to be, had 5 or 6 restaurants downtown, and they didn't want any African Americans down there. I'm not saying this is the case now. I respect the residents of Park Place. I have seen it rebound. I have seen everything that the residents say about Park Place is true, but everything that they say about Granny's does not happen to be true. And I just really wish that they, and a couple of the speakers said they patronize Granny's during the day. And I understand the young lady who spoke and said that when she comes home, she expects things to be in an orderly place like they were when she left, but you can't blame that on Granny's, You can't blame it on Granny's. So, I'm just disappointed that we are at this point and that there's no middle ground. All of the things I mentioned, and DJ one night a week, leaving at 12 o'clock for 10 months. I don't know. It seemed like that when we asked for a compromise, I expected something a little bit more than this. And so I'm just disappointed. And I understand exactly how the residents feel, but I understand exactly how the bakers feel trying to make a living.
I think we need to move forward and vote, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. All right, let's call for the question.
Dispense with the charter for requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Ms. Doyle?
Nay.
Ms. Johnson?
I know that we've spent a lot of time talking about this, and as a former, sir, please stay in order as I speak.
No, he wanted to speak, but he didn't sign up.
Okay.
Sir, please sit down.
Okay.
Please have a seat, sir.
Okay. Just listen to what I have to say. As a former Civic League president, it was my job, and as a city council person, it still is my job to do all that I can, and I am very disappointed that there could not be a compromise between the citizens, the residents of Park Place, and a local business. I made some suggestions to the local business in hopes that there could be a compromise. I don't understand. I really don't. Because I feel that to some degree, living in the city of Norfolk as partners, as building relationships, that we should be able to work together. However, when you make it about self and what is not good for the greater of all and for the community of Park Place, that is where we fall. That is where we fail. And so tonight, I'm going to have to say no to Granny's, unfortunately, because there could not be a compromise between the community and a local business. No.
Ms. McClellan?
No.
Mr. Riddick?
I'm going to, as you would expect, I'm going to vote yes for it. One of the things I'm wondering, have they outgrown their present location? And that if they have outgrown their present location, then maybe we can assist them in finding a location. They have a good fair there, they have a great fair there, and it's just unfortunate that they've had to suffer a lot of accusations and inaccuracies as an organization. Good family, Baker, good family throughout Norfolk for years. And I'm just disappointed that there were some personal issues, as what I've understood, that has caused us to reach this climax. But I vote yes.
Mr. Smeagol?
So I wanted to have a few notes on this. I do agree with Mr. Riddick about, if the community doesn't want you, find another location that will support you. I bring this back to when I first joined council, and Ocean View, for those who don't know, Ocean View was the only part of the city that was not allowed to have restaurant hours past 11 o'clock on the weekdays and 12 o'clock on the weekends. It was a gentleman's agreement by those on council that they could not extend past that point. And I knew that it was keeping future restaurants and other businesses from coming in because of that rule. But the issue was because there were establishments that stayed open late that caused issues in the community. And so the community was judging based off of that. And I want to note, I'm not judging Granny's on any of the insinuations made with shootings and all that. I don't even have any of that data in front of me.
Exactly.
But what I do have to judge on is the trust issue between the community and the business. And there was a period of time in which Granny's was violating the city's protocols, and that caused mistrust with the community. And this is what I had to do with my businesses that wanted to stay open later. And when I could not get council members to support, I was the only one beating that drum, including with one council member saying it was going to be the Wild Wild West if we did this. As I went back to those restaurant owners and said, you need to help build that trust and that relationship back with the community and show them what you can do. And they did, and it took 2.5 years before it came back, and it had a unanimous vote from council to allow them to do it. And I think that's what needs to be mended here is the trust between the two. And until we get to that point, there's not going to be support. So I vote no.
Mr. Thomas?
No.
Mr. Alexander?
Mr. Clerk, one of the things, Mr. Manager, I think that we need to do better. If there are infractions and violations and lewd behavior and disorderly conduct and code violations and illegal activity, certainly if those statements are made and our staff is led to believe that is the case, then we need to do a better job making sure that this council that this mayor, that I have that information, because I think that's important if those things are happening. However, as a former Civic League president, certainly I am, I'm moved by the Civic League, and that's the only reason that I would support the Civic League in voting no, but not based on the case that's been made by the city. I think it was very weak. I vote no.
Ordinance fails to be adopted.
R2.
R2 is an ordinance granting a conditional use permit to authorize the creation of a flag lot on property located at 1927 East Bayview Boulevard, and the Planning Commission recommends approval by a 4-1 vote.
All right. We have, let's suspend a minute for those who want to leave. All right. R2, we have Anita Unger, followed by Francine Deed. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Anita Zinkel Unger. I live at 1943 East Bayview Boulevard in Norfolk. I am speaking in opposition to R2, an ordinance granting a conditional use permit to authorize the creation of a flag lot on property located at 1927 East Bayview Boulevard. Thank you for having us. My home, as I said before, is at 1943, where my parents and I came in October of 1942. Our home is one of 4 existing lots of at least 400 feet depth in the 1900 block of Bayview. Neighbors gathered to express their concerns regarding a flag lot at 1927 East Bayview between our lot and that of Francine Gifford Deere at 1923 East Bayview. Concerns cited were the changing of the character of our neighborhood and the privacy afforded by the trees and natural wooded area around us. Those on Lynn River Road, those on Cape View Crescent, and those at 1943.
Please continue.
Further clearing and placing a home and other structures and concrete would contribute to the flooding, our paramount concern, and disturb the wildlife habitat around us. Varieties of wildlife, both flora and fauna, are unusual in a suburban neighborhood. We have squirrels, raccoons, turtles, supported by a turtle rescue person, possums, snakes, and birds and rabbits, and 2 foxes with 5 kits. Herons will return soon and nest and raise their young in the almost horizontal branches of pine trees. We have daffodils and soon forsythia and dogwood. I know this is a very soft issue compared to what came before, but is so important to us. We are at the southern point where at one point flora and fauna existed out to East Ocean View Avenue, and it came our way because of development between East Ocean View Avenue and Bayview Boulevard. The only place in Norfolk where you'll see that same amount of wildlife is at the Botanical Gardens and further out. To help explain...
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Sorry, thank you.
Francine Deed, followed by Robert Unger.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
members of the council. My name is Francine Gifford Deere, and I live at 1923 East Bayview Boulevard.
in the house next door to where the flag lot building is proposed. I'm a longtime owner of a small business in Norfolk, and as well as a resident of this wonderful city for over 7 decades. My parents purchased this property in 1958. Much of the attraction for them and for me was the deep wooded lots and the wildlife residing there. A house being built there, as Anita started to say, is going to be changing the nature of the neighborhood. My main concern is, as the neighbor, as the owner next door, who is a wonderful person, really did really nice job with his house. I'm so glad to have them there. But they began to clear a lot of trees and brush. And my property, as well as the property next door to him and the one next door to them, experienced heavy flooding during the last big storm, which is at Michael. Rainwater flooded the immediate backyard, and my husband said it was nearly a foot deep in the back 2 yards. My next door neighbor reported looking out the window and seeing a lake in his backyard. There has never been flooding like this before, at least not in the last 70 years. We are in a flood zone X, which is not a special flood hazard zone. I do carry flood insurance, but then I sell insurance. So my concern is what measures can be done to prevent even worse flooding once the concrete is poured for a house, and the proposed garage, and the concrete parking pad, and any other additions. The trees that are being taken up and planned on, even though they're saying they're going to put in 2 little trees, our concern is that we're going to end up, we have deep lots, as you can see over there, and we do have people that have left the back half, which is ours and 2, in its natural form. And I do not wish to endanger my trees and wildlife with persistent water drainage from new construction. The way that the property actually comes down a little bit, so the natural flow would be Anita's property would take up rain, and then the next property, and then comes mine, and then goes down a little bit. We're not having that now. Now we do not have those trees there and that brush. It is coming and flooding the back of mine. I do not want to endanger my trees and my wildlife with persistent water drainage from new construction. And I am asking for you tonight to please not permit this flag lot in order to prevent stormwater runoff on the neighbors. And our neighbors, as well as the wildlife, would appreciate your attention to this matter. I thank you.
Thank you. Robert Unger, followed by Andrew Mitzvah.
Good evening. I'm Robert Unger. I live at 1943 East Bayview Boulevard. I happen to be the husband of Anita, who spoke a couple minutes before it. I'd like to paraphrase one of the testimonies that was given in front of the Planning Commission on January 24th to this issue against having a flag lot at 1927 Bayview Boulevard. It was by a person by the name of Howard Duncan, who couldn't be here this evening, who lives at 8486 Cape View Crescent. He said that he was a retired Norfolk firefighter with 27 years of service. He served in Engine 15. That's the engine house located on, I'm trying to think of the street, Fisherman's Road. And he drove the truck for 7 years before he retired. And he spoke of the difficulty of fire trucks for accessing 1927 Bayview. That's the address of the flag lot if it was to come into existence. He indicated that the 1900 block of Bayview Boulevard distinctly narrows at the beginning of the at its beginning of block with Cape View. It's dramatically narrow from the regular width of Bayview Boulevard that runs for a couple miles. And that the turning radius for a fire truck, such as the sizes that they have now, makes it extremely doubtful that a truck would have the turning radius to even get into the flag lot from the access road. And he said that he couldn't conceive of driving a truck that large into the 300-foot lane that would be the pole of the flag lot to get back for an emergency. And I did some investigation myself, and I went to the engine house at Engine House 15, and they do house what's called a Telsquirt pumper that weighs 51,440 pounds, over 20 tons, with dimensions of 11 feet 2 inches high, 32 feet 6 inches in length, and 8 feet 6 inches wide. And this fire truck is regularly employed.
Thank you, sir.
I'm speaking against it, and I hope that you will vote so.
We got it. Thank you. Andrew Mitzkus, followed by Ron Mitchell.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilman, Councilwoman, and Mr. Manager. Andrew Metzkus at 1931 East Bayview Boulevard. I am the owner. I'm selling the lot to Mr. Ron Mitchell, who is applying to build the house at 1927. So I live right in front of the proposed lot. Talking to a couple of the issues that were brought up by Frank and Anita, and also Francine. Great neighbors. We have a good relationship. As far as the flooding concern, from the north side, which is looking at this picture on the right-hand side, that's the Unger's residence. There is a natural landscape decline from the east side to the west, from right to left. So, and then Francine's, the Giffords are to the left there. There is a natural runoff towards that area where water, they have said, is pooled. I have not seen it. During Hurricane Matthew, which was during October of 2016, we had started clearing the lot, not from all the trees and that, but from the brush and the English ivy that was basically smothering the trees. There was a lot of dead trees. I had a landscaper come down who was my brother-in-law, and we had actually worked on clearing that brush and the ivy and cleaning up the lot so we could actually walk back there because it was a dense area that we couldn't even see. But that was done in starting the majority of it in November timeframe. It was after the fact. So if it was thick like that, we weren't able to see it. But I know the builder, who I think will speak, they're not changing that landscape. So any runoff, I know the city planning department has approved it with the rain barrels and that plan, but that footprint is very small. It was also noted that, so when we bought this house, when I got stationed here in 2006, that lot had been previously subdivided back in the early 2000s, late 90s. And we bought it with the intention that we may be able to sell it. And we have come to a financial area where that is our desire to have to sell to do other things that we as a family have decided to do. With that, with the firefighting effort and stuff, I have also spoke with them. There's a hydrant right across. I know the good firefighters of Norfolk would be able to go back there. It's a 200-foot pole. They work with that, but I do know that there are struggles having been stationed at Norfolk Naval Shipyard. There's a lot of firefighters have to get around the congestion that. So I do respect that, but the personnel that I did talk to, differing opinion, said it wouldn't be an issue. But I do know there's two sides. As far as wildlife, ours is opened up area. There's the two very wooded lots that they are concerned about. That is, the wildlife do live back in that area, but we haven't taken down a lot of large trees, but there are going to be some that are going to have to be done, and that worked with the city's arborist to come up with a plan to support that outline. As far as the, not changing the landscape for the flooding, I know that was the major concern. I mean, there's really, by right, which came out through the planning department, if I sold this lot to somebody else, they could clear every single tree on there by right, would never come to a planning commission, and they can put up a very large accessory structure, one that would not even come up for a vote. I think this is, I met the Mitchells. They're great people. He's a retired Navy chief. I look forward to having him as a neighbor. But that is all I have. I'm standby for any further questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Ron Mitchell, followed by James Richardson.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Ronald Mitchell, 9518 3rd Bay Street, Unit 116. We've been in this process for about 5 months now trying to buy this piece of property. We lived in Norfolk for 5 years. Love the area, love Ocean View. This is going to be our retirement home. This is where we want to settle down. I know there's been some concern that one letter said that we would create some traffic. I'm not sure how that would be, but there's only 2 vehicles, my wife and I. The other concern that I hear a lot about is flooding. And we just recently had 2.7 inches of rain. And I have pictures if I can pass them to. And there's literally no standing water on the property at all. I also have pictures of these are the mature trees that are going to come down. There's just 3 main large trees that have to come down. 2 are in the driveway that would be made, and 1 in the very back. The other pictures that I'm going to show you are the other small trees that need to be removed. I understand their concern about removing trees, and we are going to replace those trees with 2 other trees for each one that comes down, and that was by the arborist from the city. So that will be taken care of. The other concern that I see is the neighbors are very concerned about their foliage, and I would stress to them that the ivy, the English ivy that is not natural to this area, is destroying the trees that they have on their property. So I thank Andrew for what he did by removing all that ivy that is destroying the trees. You can see that in these pictures. So it's a shame that the trees on the other side of the property, on both sides, are actually dying. There's very few. They're actually, this last storm, a bunch of them fell into Andrew's property, and he had to remove all of them because they're dying so much. So I definitely am in favor of this. I really want to live there, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. James Richardson, followed by Catherine Whitlock.
Good evening.
Good evening.
James Richardson, 9571 Bay Point Drive. The Mitchells contacted me a few months ago and asked that I would build them a house at this property that we're speaking about tonight. Designed a house for them that fits the look of Norfolk. It's a traditional style architecture. It's actually a house that's previously been built through NRHA, so the architecture meets the standards of Norfolk. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of a couple of issues that were raised by the residents. Some of it has already been discussed, so I'd just like to reiterate a few things. The trees that are in question, we've tried to find a spot on the lot that has the least amount of trees on it. The last thing we want to do was take trees down. The majority of the large trees that needed to come down were because of the alleyway heading back to it. The city is requiring us to replace 2 trees for every tree that we take out. So any flooding concerns of a standpoint of trees being gone, because the root system is not pulling the water out of the ground anymore, should be alleviated by that. I don't plan on altering the drainage of the lot. We're going to set the house on the middle and make sure that the water drains away from the lot, away from the house onto the lot. So any natural drainage that's there now that's been occurring for the last 50 or 60 years should not be altered at all. They speak of landscaping. There is a new city code that we have to have an approved landscape plan at permitting. So there will be a heavy landscaping plan going back in. I would have to say that we'll be putting more landscaping back in than anything will be disturbing that's there at the point of what's sitting there right now. The access for the fire department getting back there, I'm not a fireman. I don't know what the rules and regulations are. I would like to point out, though, that the 20-foot driveway heading back there is no smaller than any alleyway at East Beach or some of the other areas that I've built in at the city of Norfolk for access to get into it. And I just want to be here to answer any questions you may have about the building.
Thank you, sir. All right. Catherine Whitlock.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
Council. I'm Catherine Whitlock. I live at 9224 Cape View Avenue. So I'm just down the street from this proposed property. My family moved here when I was 6 months old, and I've been here, and I love Norfolk. It's an old city. It has so many wonderful things about it and culture. And now that I've retired, I have become a Norfolk Master Gardener. I did some further schooling and now a tree steward. I will be working with other Master Gardeners that have achieved this as well, starting in mid-March, to help the city catalog the trees, working with the tree canopy. I'm sure all of you are aware that we have to all the cities in Hampton Road are concerned about their tree canopy. Norfolk, unfortunately, doesn't have like the Pungo area or whatever to boost their percentage, but we are looking at that. We support it. And what concerns me about this is that once you take down those big trees, it's going to take 30 to 50 years to get another big tree. And I understand they're replanting, but they're going to be small trees, and it's not going to be the same. And you have to think about this and what it does to that community. It's a beautiful area back there. We have a lot of Baystar homes, and people take care of their property. They take care of their homes themselves. And I just don't want us to see, just for the chasing the dollar, that we forget what's happening to our world and how we need to protect it. And we need to think about this and not just automatically, okay, everybody clear it out and we'll plant trees, it'll be okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Homewood, will you please come to the podium?
George, just real quick, because we haven't had a flag lot here in years. I think we had some down in East Ocean View. There's one difference with this one. This one was an existing flag lot, meaning it was already parceled out, which some of the ones that we've dealt with in the past, they've actually wanted to parcel them to make them into flag lots. But do we have a kind of a long-standing history that we put this before civic leagues? And if the civic leagues say yes to these, then we usually supported them. I think that's why this rule came into effect, is wanted to make sure the community was aware. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we voted against some of these in the past because civic leagues have said no. I know this is a close vote, but the Bayview Civic League, which is one of my more active civic leagues, voted in favor of it. But maybe you could clear some of that up. Maybe you can't clear it up.
Well, Mr. Smeagol, I think some of that may have something to do with, whether or not you can have opening hours after midnight, in Ocean View. Some agreements in the past. We look at it on a case-by-case basis. And in this case, the flag lot was already platted. This is a piece of property that came into the city from Princess Anne County. Best we can tell, the flag lot came into the city from Princess Anne County. But has been part of that main piece. If you take a look at the map that's up there, you'll realize it's the largest piece of property in this entire area. Yeah. Cutting out the flag lot leaves that still basically the same size as the lots around it. So this is not shrinking and creating extra density in a place where you wouldn't normally see it. It appears to us that this was actually originally intended to be a lot that would have been divided vertically, if you will, rather than horizontally. But there was probably not just a little bit less width, so that dividing it vertically would have created two lots that were slightly narrower, and so the decision was made to do the flag lot. Area-wise, you've got plenty of area for both. And as I said, the area of those lots is consistent with the surrounding lots, in fact, bigger than many once you get 2 or 3 lots away. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. The Civic League thing.
The Civic League, in this case, has chosen not to oppose this. Again, I think it has something to do with the size. But yeah, we do listen to the Civic Leagues. As I mentioned downstairs, for whatever reason, flag lots are not a favored development technique in the city of Norfolk. And so they often are fraught when we come forward with them.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Mr. Clerk?
Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel?
Thank you for coming down and speaking. The Ungers, thank you for coming down. I appreciate it. Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. Mr. Clerk, R3?
R3 is an ordinance authorizing the remarketing of the City of Norfolk, Virginia General Obligation Variable Rate Demand Bonds, Series 2007, and the replacement of or amendment to certain financing documents related thereto. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R4?
R4 is an ordinance authorizing the city manager to negotiate an agreement in substantial conformity with the terms and conditions of the attached purchase and sale agreement for the purpose of purchasing certain property known as 2300 Kimball Terrace in the city of Norfolk for the Ohio Creek Watershed Improvement Project, authorizing the purchase of said property and authorizing the expenditure of a sum of up to $80,000 for such purpose from funds heretofore appropriated. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R5?
R5 is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to credit various accounts of the Department of Utilities in a total amount of $897,721.90 so as to reflect uncollectible balances for fiscal year 2015.
Clerk, call the roll.
Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R6?
R6 is an ordinance to amend and reordain sections A, B, and C of section 19.1 of the Norfolk City Code so as to define illegal gambling. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R7?
R7 is an ordinance to amend and reordain sections 24.1-6 and 24.1-7 of the Norfolk City Code 1979 so as to establish new rates for the municipal yacht harbor known generally as Waterside Marina. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R8?
R8 is a resolution adopting financial policies. Adopt the resolution. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R9?
R9 is an ordinance to amend and reordain Chapter 45.6 of the Norfolk City Code 1979 as amended to provide additional tax incentives as a means of retaining existing technology businesses, encouraging existing technology businesses to expand within the city, and attracting new technology businesses to the city. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R11?
R10, sir.
R10?
R10 is an ordinance to amend and reordain sections 18.1-2 and 18.1-10 of the Code of the City of Norfolk, Virginia, 1979, modifying the United States Food and Drug Administration Food Code so that foods offered for public consumption that are not required to undergo state inspection may be prepared in a private home. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smiegel?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
R11?
R11 is a resolution supporting the 2020 census and creating a complete count committee.
Ellis W. James?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Oh my goodness, what happened to my city manager? He grew a beard.
He'll be right back.
My name is Ellis W. James. I reside at 2021 Ken Lake Place here in the city of Norfolk. I wanted to call attention to this. 11 is my lucky number, so go figure. The resolution that you are considering supporting the 20 sentence and a complete committee count is important. There are things afoot at the national level and the state level and so on, which would urge each of you, members of council, to pay close attention to how we take note of and address the issue of the census. Now, I'm not trying to drag you into the weeds or in the thicket of the national situation, but it is important that we pay close attention. And since you put this on the agenda, I think it's important that you would make sure that you vote in favor of the count committee. And if there are any members of council that have a problem with that, I hope they will speak up now and not later. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. James. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Adopt the resolution. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McCullen?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R12.
R12 is an ordinance authorizing the city manager to negotiate an agreement in substantial conformity with the terms and conditions of the attached easement purchase agreement for the purpose of construction and maintaining a berm and drainage at 708 Forbes Street in the city of Norfolk for the Ohio Creek Watershed Improvement Project, authorizing the purchase of said easement and authorizing the expenditure of a sum of up to $12,844 for such purchase from funds heretofore appropriated. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R13.
R13 is an ordinance authorizing the city manager to negotiate an agreement in substantial conformity with the terms and conditions of the attached easement purchase agreement for the purchase of construction and maintaining a berm at 715 Filer Street in the city of Norfolk for the Ohio Creek Watershed Improvement Project, authorizing the purchase of said easement and authorizing the expenditure of a sum of up to $12,828 for the such purpose from funds heretofore appropriated. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. Mr. Clerk, do you have others?
Yes, sir. I have three more, sir.
Yes, sir. R14.
R14 is an ordinance authorizing the rental rehabilitation program, Renovate Norfolk program, and down payment assistance program, and authorizing, therefore, the expenditure of $1,750,000. Dispense with the charter requirement for reading the ordinance and adopt. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R15.
R15 is a resolution appointing Keith T. Torian as the city-appointed designee to the Animal Welfare Board of Review. Adopt the resolution. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye. R16.
R16 is a letter of appointment. I hereby appoint Latasha Simon to the position of Assistant City Auditor 1, effective February 19, 2019, in Plan 1 of the city's general compensation plan, to serve at the pleasure of the city auditor. Confirm the appointment. Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye. Is Miss Latasha Simmons here? Simon here?
No.
Okay.
Aye.
Ms. McClellan?
Aye.
Mr. Riddick?
Aye.
Mr. Smigiel,
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Mr. Alexander?
Aye.
That's all I have, Mr. President.
That's all you have. All right. We're going to go into new business. And the first speaker on the new business is Elizabeth Pledger, followed by Levon Pledger.
Can I go before Olivia? Is my daughter.
Yeah, as a parent, yes, you can. She can come with you. If you can come together if you like. And they'll be followed by Yvonne Bryant and Alton Robinson.
I do it all the time. Good evening, City Council people, Mayor Alexander, Doug Smith, our City Manager. My name is Levon Pledger, and I reside at 304 East Only Road in Norfolk, Virginia. And I come today on behalf of the St. Paul's residents, consisting of Young's Terrace residents, Tidewater Gardens, and Calvert Square residents. Last year in January, the 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, City Council adopted a resolution. And in that resolution, it was promised that they would do a few things as far as the residents have been concerned in the St. Paul's area. And in section 1 of that resolution, it says that that Norfolk, the city, and the Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority will engage the community stakeholders in the development of the revitalization plan of my area. It also states in section 2 that human services transformation plan that will provide supportive services aimed at enhancing life outcomes and involving intense case management services for each family and their circumstances. In section 3, it also states that the city of Norfolk and the Housing Authority, in collaboration with the residents, will develop a coordinated, comprehensive revitalization plan. And then it will be community focused first and foremost. And I was here that day that resolution was adopted, and I asked City Council to vote yes on that. And when I asked, I said, what happens when the city does not honor its commitment, its obligations? And Angela Graves responded with, you hold them accountable. You tell them that they are not doing what they promised that they were going to do for us. And I have here in writing that here in section 2 that we have not been recognized as collaborative partners. Many of the residents feel as though we have not been recognized in an equitable and just manner as partners in this revitalization plan. And that is through a number of things, which I will get to later. Intense case management services have not been provided yet to my people, and we are struggling, and the plan still presses forward. It has not been a true engagement of my residents in my community. And I think Mr. Smith might remember this, that anytime a decision is made or something happens, I try to be in a room as much as possible. I try to come to meetings, whether they're housing authority meetings, whether they're city meetings. I try to be everywhere. And my question to City Council is, will you support a 1-for-1 brick and mortar replacement units in my community so that my people will live in Norfolk? We have a right to Norfolk. We want to live here. We want to stay in our community. We want to be recognized as equitable and just partners.
All right.
Sorry. You say yes, and you gotta say your yes. Read the whole thing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Olivia Pledger, and I am 11 years old, and I live at 304 East Only Road. Norfolk is my home. It's where I go to school, where I play with all my friends, and it is the foundation of all my memories. The family of the St. Paul's area wants you to know, will you commit to providing 1-for-1 brick and stick housing for displaced units in the city of Norfolk.
Thank you.
You need this?
We don't need it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yvonne Bryant, followed by Alton Robinson. And Alton will be followed by Kimberly Bray.
Good afternoon. My name is Yvonne Bryant. I live at 1163.
Yes.
The Tidewater Gardens and stuff. I've just been living out here for 4 years. And for me and stuff, I've been here lived in Norfolk all my life. And this area is what I'll try to say. It's convenient for me and stuff because I'm on bus line and stuff for my job. I've been on my job for 24 years. If I leave this area, I will lose my job. And plus, it's a convenience for me to get to my mother's because I have a mother and stuff with dementia, and I have to stay in Norfolk area so I can take care of my mother and get to my job. And now we want 1 brick homes for each resident in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, followed by Kimberly Bra.
Good evening, Councilman Alton Robinson. My address is 314 West 27th Street. I'm here because I have a whole array of the plans. And if anybody was taking read these plans, you'd be really confused. March of 2018 at Ruffin Middle School, that question was asked about the 1-for-1 because it had been in the plan. And there's 1,674 units. But in the plan, they're going to be 250 new residents. Also in the plan, it states, let me find this right here. It states that that they're going to, here it is, seek out privately owned rental units for lease located in Norfolk's low poverty areas to list on NRHA's voucher referral list. Why low income housing area in Norfolk? And where are they? Park Place, Huntersville, Barrard Park, Broad Creek, your neighborhood, Ocean View? Where are they? They don't exist. It's too much mislanguage here. Now, if you go back and look in 2014, they demolished Moulton Park. That was a long time ago. Plenty of time to develop that area to prepare for this. It's like somebody's dropping the ball and the people are suffering. They're God's people now. These are God's people y'all dealing with. And I don't believe God gonna be pleased with these situations that's occurring because the truth is not really being told to the people. And it's right here in the plan. It said, and listen, here's the timelines. It says here, young terrorists, demolition disposition. A phased demolition may be submitted. Demolition is intended to coincide with the redevelopment efforts. Disposition will be submitted for land to be transferred to support development of the area. To be submitted. Then it says a date, application approved, submitted, or approved application to be submitted September the 20th. September the 20th. That's a short period of time. And you're gonna start with phase 1 in Tidewater Park during this fiscal year. This 5-year plan started back in 2015. So here it is 2019, you just getting started. So you know that you're already behind the 8 ball. And then you're trying to tell people about what's gonna happen to them when you're gonna move them from one low income housing to another. I reached out to NRHA and the city to try to partner with them. I even got one of the residents and walked them through to even start a contract and development company because I was under the impression that they were gonna push that opportunity to the residents. But that's not so. I'm gonna just end with this.
Thank you.
It's not right. I'll just leave it at that.
Kimberly, followed by Pat Harris.
Read the plans.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for the opportunity to address, and bear with me. I'm just getting over
illness myself. My name is Kimberly. I am recently a student at TCC, and I've been a resident in St. Paul's Quadrant for almost 5 years. My fellow residents and I are confused and concerned because there seems to be conflicting information about or conflicting information circulating where the city claims to put the people first, or the residents of the St. Paul's Quadrant first, but we as residents are feeling like commodities, or rather burdens to the city that are just about to be shuffled away, swept under the rug, or just swept away to wherever. As we noticed earlier, there is a lapse, kind of blurry, kind of murky communication that happens between the city and residents, and there have been no guarantees about our true options post-demolition. Also, there are studies circulating that show that there actually is a lack of affordable housing in Hampton Roads, let alone Norfolk. So my questions are, can you promise current St. Paul's residents will not be displaced to unfamiliar territory? And are you willing to build one-for-one building replacements for the demolished homes of St. Paul's? Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Harris, followed by Tammy Shepard.
Hi, my name is Patricia Harris. I live at 456 Spencer Street. I only been there for like 5 years. By the time I've been there, I seem like they've been lying to the people and leaving them blind. And I feel that they should not do that to the people. They should it's just too much confusion, because people just pulling people this place. Everybody having meetings over here, meeting over here. So all I'm just asking the people to be fair to the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy Shepard, followed by
Yes.
Robert Henderson.
Good evening, Mr. Riddick. I need you to wake up for this, please. Thank you. My name is Tammy Shepard. I live 470 Fenchurch Street. I've been living there for 5 years. I've been in Norfolk for 51 years. All of my roots are here, generation after generation. I went to Blair Middle School. I went to Maury High School. I went to Lodgemount Elementary. We want to know if you will support a one-for-one brick to stick for everyone in our community family in Norfolk. We deserve to live in Norfolk. This is where we are. This is where we want to be. Can y'all support that? Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Henderson. Is Robert gone? Mr. Rogers, did Robert leave? If not, we'll. Okay, all right, move on. Tyler Eldred, followed by Amanda Mylor.
My name is Tyler Eldred. I live in 3226 East Ocean View Avenue, apartment 13. Council, we come to you as a public who is losing its trust in our city as we learn of this city's active participation in some of the most inhumane domestic policies we've seen in a generation. We have lost trust because we are listening not only to the audio recordings of wailing children in the ICE detention facilities mandated by the DHS, but also the headlines. Thousands of kids sexually assaulted while detained by ICE, a pregnant immigrant woman who has lost her child, toddlers trying to kill themselves or returning home with PTSD symptoms. If the idea that these people have broken a law means that we are to accept these practices, what atrocity would not be justified in this same way? Rather, it is the duty of the city not to surrender to the cruelty of the system as it is, but to endeavor to shape the system in order to safeguard its people. To show to us that this city is truly people first, people eventually, or even people at all, this council must take decisive action to build that trust and refuse to be ICE's jailkeeper and hunting party. I also urge this council to listen to the petition of these residents of St. Paul, the truest witnesses to the character of this city that we could hope for. Thanks.
Thank you. Amanda Milor, followed by Louise Black.
My name is Amanda Malore. I live at 115 East 41st Street in Norfolk. I am coming because, as it has become apparent through the course of this meeting, and as you said earlier, Mr. Schmiegel, there needs to be more transparency in the goings-on of the city of Norfolk. That is very apparent in the fact that our sheriff has been housing ICE detainees. It is apparent in what we are hearing from St. Paul's residents, and I do not understand how the city can afford to spend resources on detaining or on holding ICE detainees who very often have not been accused of any crime other than being here. But we can't come up with the resources to help our own residents. Every single person who lives in the city of Norfolk has a right to be here. They have a right to housing, and they have a right to be treated fairly and equitably by our city, as do the people who are brought here by ICE. It's very important that our city demonstrate to its citizens that we value them, that we respect their dignity and their humanity. It's important that we demonstrate that to all people who come into our city. I would like to ask that we begin refusing to hold ICE detainees, and that the city commit to one-to-one brick and mortar housing for all of the residents of the St. Paul's communities. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask either the mayor or the city attorney or the city manager address the role of council as it relates to the detainees of ICE and the sheriff's role?
Yes, so when we, yes, we can. We could do it now. We could just get through the speakers, but the manager's prepared.
Whatever your choice.
To make that remark, whatever.
Thank you, Mayor. I think most folks know this, but just to be clear, the sheriff is an elected official, and the sheriff is elected by the residents. He does not report to me. He does not report to the city council. He operates the jail. He makes the policies of what happens in there. And he and I had a conversation today. He has talked to folks that have been concerned and shared their concerns, and is anxious and willing to talk to anyone that wants to share their concerns with him. But I think it's important for folks to know that this body does not control what happens in that jail.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
No, ma'am. Okay. No. All right. So Louise Black, followed by Ann Creasley.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Louisa Mechi Black. I live at 401 Baratat Street. Before then, I lived at Rua Dr. Manuel Marreiros in Ilha do Governador with my family. As a first-generation Brazilian-American immigrant and somebody who loves this city, I would like to strongly speak out against the practice of interning immigrants at Norfolk City Jail, which y'all have more power in than I do. Norfolk City Jail is slated to hold only 878 people. As of 2015, it averaged holding 1,300 people a day, and that was before the ICE detainees. The only way Norfolk City Jail can stretch its capacity...
I'm sorry, I was late with the text. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
The only way Norfolk City Jail can stretch its capacity to house ICE detainees, in addition to this already overpopulated area, is to compromise the conditions of basic humanity for the people detained there. Since 2017, Joe Barron has held over 1,200 people arrested by ICE. Most of the people held there have not seen a judge and have not been convicted of a crime. So when people die in Norfolk City Jail, and people die in Norfolk City Jail, someone died there in January. He was 18 years old. The governing bodies of the city of Norfolk, and that includes you, and every single decision maker that has power in this situation, has blood on their hands. Joe Barron has also shown himself to be lax about the limitations that would supposedly hold ICE detainees at Norfolk City Jail sustainable, such as the 72-hour limit. And he suspended that 72-hour limit for inmates to be housed there for 3 months. During that 3 months, up to 300 people came in 1 month during this suspension. I would like to remind you that in January 2019, Deshaun Johnson died at Norfolk City Jail. He was 18 years old. In 2018, Cottrell Jamar Washington died at Norfolk City Jail. He was 17 years old. Reginald Cooper died in 2016 after being found guilty of pickpocketing less than $5. When you send someone to a jail that's overcrowded with underfunded healthcare services, you are functionally sentencing them to death without a trial. When you willingly volunteer to detain even more people in an already overcrowded jail, that's moving functionally from homicidal to genocidal. I would like to remind the City Council that we've seen this already play out at Hampton Roads Regional Jail, where the exact combination of factors of underfunded healthcare, overcrowding, and a contract with ICE made Hampton Roads Regional Jail infamous as one of the deadliest jails in the country, and it was only after countless federal investigations, dozens of deaths, and national outrage that the contract with ICE ended. Will it take hundreds more deaths at Norfolk City Jail to end its contract with ICE?
Thank you so much. Ann Creasy, followed by Elizabeth Berthall.
Hi, my name is Ann Creasy, and I live at 112 West 34th Street, Norfolk, Virginia. I am curious about the City Council's power in regard to the city's relationship, or I guess the sheriff's relationship with ICE. I just looked it up, and I see here the Norfolk Sheriff should follow the lead of the Fairfax County Sheriff, who made the right decision and terminated Fairfax intergovernmental service agreement with the Department of Homeland Security, under which it was housing detainees for ICE. So I guess that is not something that is under the purview of City Council, but I think that that is something that City Council could encourage the sheriff to do. A lot of other cities have been doing this. I guess those cities have contracts with ICE. Philadelphia has terminated its contract with ICE. Leaders across California, Oregon, and Northern Virginia have decided to cancel their ICE contracts. And in a Virginia Pilot article, which y'all may be familiar with, it was published on February 14th. And I can leave that for you if you're interested. It says here that the Norfolk Sheriff's Office is under contract. So I think that that's what's really important, is that we figure out how to get him to end that contract. I'm also curious that ICE has paid nearly $300,082 to house detainees in Norfolk Jail, although, according to the article, state officials have siphoned off most of that. I'm interested to know where that money has gone and what it has been used for. And I just reiterate other comments that have been made about the nature of ICE, is that it will take in suspected illegal immigrants, even if they have not broken a law. And sometimes they won't be put before a judge until they ask for bond hearings, which can take weeks. And that's even if they ask for the bond hearings. So yeah, I'm just very concerned and hope that the City Council can help the residents of Norfolk to pressure the sheriff and our questionable relationship with ICE. I would also like to speak in regards to the St. Paul's residents. It's my understanding that the People's First program won't have a contract signed until April. And residents could be being pushed out of Tidewater Gardens as early as June. That's too soon. That's like just over a month and a half, maybe, assuming the contract's signed in early April. So I really urge the city to push back the timeline on these plans to give the People's First program the time that it needs. Thank you.
Elizabeth Berthall, followed by Steve Baggerly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for the opportunity to speak.
I live at 942 Fern Ridge Road in Virginia Beach, but I come before you today because I think that the relationship with ICE is a cross-cutting issue that affects all Hampton Roads communities. I'd also like to speak to you on the basis of the research I conducted into detention of unaccompanied minors in the U.S. immigration system while I studied at Johns Hopkins University. I oppose ICE with every fiber of my being. As decision makers and community leaders, I encourage you to do the same. I oppose their mission because I believe that people have a right to migrate, to seek economic opportunity, much as my family did when they came here. If ICE's policy of collateral arrests had been in place at that time, I'm sure that my great-grandfather would have been arrested for speaking only Hungarian. Not only do I oppose ICE's mission, but I oppose their tactics of arresting people first and asking questions later, of detaining people first and trying them later. And I'm sure that the city of Norfolk would not want to find themselves in a similar position to the city of Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the case of Hilmar Ramos Gomez, a U.S. citizen, passport holder, and Marine veteran who was flagged by ICE inappropriately and then detained in a Grand Rapids city jail. The city of Grand Rapids is now involved in a legal battle over the treatment of Mr. Ramos Gomez. I understand the challenges that the sheriff runs in funding the jail. I understand the challenges that you all face in funding the local criminal justice system, but there's been a lot of discussion today about trust. And the trust between the sheriff and the community is something that you cannot put a price tag on. So despite the funding that ICE provides to the sheriff, I encourage all of you as community leaders to encourage him to terminate that contract.
Steve, followed by Jeff Hewitt.
Good evening. I'm Steve Baggerly. I live at 2616 Bowden's Ferry Road. And first of all, I'd just like to say I'm 100% in support of the St. Paul's people and their request for one brick and mortar replacement for their housing. And I came to speak about the ICE issue as well. And I guess I'll invite people in the audience who are opposed to ICE holding prisoners in our jail, but who aren't going to be speaking. Anybody else? Thank you. And I think it's important that we speak with you all also because we want you to be on our side. We want you to hold the sheriff's feet to the fire on this issue with us. So I was disturbed to find out through the pilot that ICE has been using Norfolk City Jail as a holding pen. ICE's mistreatment of people on the border, especially children, is known around the world. ICE is the president's tool used to deport many people who have been here for decades with lives and families, often with no memory of the country they're being sent to. ICE is deporting people right now who'd been given temporary protective status from El Salvador, Honduras, Haiti, Nicaragua, and elsewhere, who fled natural disasters and mass violence, again, many here for decades with lives and families here, only to be returned to countries still racked with devastating poverty and violence. As we speak, ICE is even rounding up Iraqis who fled Saddam Hussein 20 or 30 years ago and is sending them back despite Iraq's refusal to guarantee their safety. Under a president who has banned Syrians, Somalis, Iranians, Libyans, Yemenis, Venezuelans, and North Koreans from coming here, who's used profanity to describe countries with black majorities, and declared his preference for white immigrants from Norway, ICE is a key component in administration policy that has more than a whiff about it of a type of ethnic cleansing. Why would Norfolk want to help them with their given mission? Why would we want to make money off it? Instead, we can choose the better angels of our nature and the higher aspirations of our country, which gets its strength and character from being composed of people from so many different places. We can learn from Leviticus. Everyone's heard of Leviticus 19:18, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, but 15 verses on we read, when foreigners reside with you in your land, do not bother them. You shall treat the foreigner who resides with you no differently than the natives born among you. have the same love for them as for yourselves. Let's put this into practice and get ICE out of the city jail. Thank you.
Jeff Hewitt, followed by Jane George.
My name is Jeff Hewitt. I reside at 522 Spotswood Avenue over in Ghent. Look, we stand here after the last citywide election that had 9.88% people voting. This is a sick democracy that we're living in right now. And I have to believe that that is at least partly because of cynicism and mistrust of the city government. And look, I know some of you personally, you know I'm a fan of the service that you give. But there's a Confederate monument that we talked about moving 2 years ago now, it's still there. We have a community of people who I sat in this room and in other rooms and listened as they were told that they were going to be given help, and they're coming up on an eviction in a matter of 3-4 months, and there's no help. And then I wake up and I read in the pilot, which is what it is, and maybe some of it's exactly right, maybe some of it's not right, that the city that I have given my life and arts to is aiding and abetting an evil organization run by a white supremacist president. Let's be real here. And I am heartbroken at the thought of that. Mr. Riddick, with all due respect, I mean, I read in the paper, and I don't know if I wasn't there in the room, but it quoted you as saying somebody's going to make money off of this. Why not us? With all due respect, that's an argument that has been used to justify any manner of evil. I spoke to the sheriff this morning, and look, I can read the budget, and I can read the city code, and I understand you guys don't run the jail. You don't make the rules for the jail, but you do give the jail money. And that budget has to come with some sort of leverage. You could stand up today and say, we're not going to give you the money if you keep doing this. We're not going to fund this. And you're going to have to find your money from somewhere else. I don't believe you're actually illegal or irresponsible for funding the jail. I cannot tell you how disappointed I was to hear that some of you apparently knew about this back in November. And it took an article from the Pilot for you to stand up and say anything about it. I hope that you have something to say about that, because I desperately want to believe in city government. You guys, in this world that we're living in now, where so much evil has just become normalized, you guys are the last sentries on the wall of freedom. We're depending on you. And I really need you to do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane George, followed by Sarah Senator.
Good evening. Recently, it was reported that the Sheriff's Department allowed the use of Norfolk City Jail has led critical support to ICE, the domestic terrorist organization that last year infamously kidnapped thousands of migrant children, ripped them from their parents' arms, and forced them to sleep on the concrete floors of for-profit concentration camps. I often wonder what I would have done had I been alive during Nazi Germany, if I had been in Germany during the reign of Hitler. And to see members of this council throw up their arms and claim that there's nothing we can do because the sheriff is an elected official is very telling about how some of you would answer that question. Additionally, 4,000 families in Tidewater Gardens, Calvert Square, and Young Terrace are living under the threat of homelessness as their communities face demolition in the near future. This is a war on the working class, and I implore this council to do everything in their power to make it stop. Thank you. No one is illegal on stolen land.
Sarah? It's Sarah, followed by Benjamin Cobb.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Sanatkar, and I live on 5141 Evesham Drive. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak today. I'm standing in front of you as an immigrant from Iran, as a person who knows how life can get outside of this country. People like me were not born with rights like the American people. We immigrants come from different countries, which the majority of them do not have a constitution to protect our rights. They simply just are running away from the countries that are not safe for their families. How much does the humanity cost? The Norfolk City has been promised to receive $300,000 from the ICE towards immigrants, which the city is not receiving all of it, just a small portion of it. The city has been lying to immigrants by empty promises. For example, the Norfolk's police chief, Larry Boone, has held meetings with Latino residents telling them that the Norfolk police does not care about immigration status, which was a lie. The Norfolk City compared locking immigrants to locking up inmates for the FBI, which is different. These immigrants have not been charged with any crimes, nor they have seen a judge for a hearing. These immigrants are being held and suspicious of civil immigration violations. These people are not criminals. They're just fighting for their lives, for the life that you were born with in the U.S. These people are hardworking members of our society. They're not evil, they're just human beings. I'm standing in front of you speaking for 1,200 immigrants who are sitting in the city jail unfairly. These people have been racially profiled and arrested with no criminal backgrounds. I'm standing here speaking because this is inhuman, unfair, racist, and more importantly, it's un-American. I'm speaking because I care, and I hope you do the same.
Danny Lee Ginn.
Benjamin Cobb.
I'm sorry. Before you come, Danny, Mr. Cobb, I do apologize. Come on. No, you come on, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Council members. I would like to give you a small overview. It would help you understand why I'm here. Back in 1995, at Sherwood Community, we started an athletic program. We started with 8 basketball teams. Since that time, we have grown into 6 basketball teams, 6 indoor soccer teams, 6 outdoor soccer teams, 3 baseball teams, 3 football teams, and cheerleaders. Needless to say, all of this equipment was being housed at my home. That has to change. If I'm going to stay happy at home, I got to get rid of equipment. So I like being happy. About 3 years ago, I talked with Councilwoman here about help. And she gave us help in the form of a grant. So we proceeded with Block by Block. It's one of the programs in the city of Norfolk. And I spoke with Mr. Jim Herbert, counselors, countless of meetings. And I visit quite a few offices, people who were leading me down the path of getting what we need. I had a problem communicating with Recreation. Recently, after about 3 years, I went to the city manager's office, and I spoke with the young lady over there. She set up another meeting with me, with people from Recreation. They came out and revisited the site that was approved for us to build a shed. They told me they'll let me know before Christmas. They didn't. So I contacted the city manager's office again. And they recontacted Parks, Rec, and Open Space. Then they sent Mr. Ed Matthews and Mr. James Nicholson to speak with me. And this year they said that they will have an answer for me before Christmas. That didn't happen either. So finally they got in touch with me and said, Mr. Cobb, moving forward, we're not doing that anymore. We're not allowing sheds to be built at recreation centers. Prior to that, Mr. Darrell Crennington told me that I need to get a set of drawings made so he would know what the building looks like. We did that. City inspector says we don't need a drawing because it's a small shed. They're not going to inspect it anyway. I don't understand why it's the practice of the city to run citizens through a loop that there's a wall at the end, and I believe they already know it. That is unfair. We as volunteers devote hours of our time year after year after year. I competed in soccer against Councilman Speaker. I believe we beat his team too.
It was a tie.
Okay. But if that's the practice of the city, I would like to think that it would be changed. Because if it's going to be no to me, just say it, and I can accept that. But if you drag me on for this amount of time, I'm very disappointed. I should not have to be here making this little speech. Thank you.
My name is Danny Lee Yin. I reside at 3844 Dare Circle. At one point, I got the privilege of sitting down to meet Mr. Smeagol on a face-to-face. He was bold enough and courageous enough to sit down and talk to me for 20 minutes. And we talked about a number of issues. And as he was leaving, and he made sure he left at 20 minutes, he asked me an unusual question. He says, Danny, you come here every 2 weeks and you beat a dead horse. Why do you do that? And he left. Okay. So I thought about it, and a situation came up at the last council meeting. Mr. Smeagol was not here. He was sick, and I hope he's getting better now. But at the council meeting, there was a proposal to put together a housing project that was supposed to be a complement to the St. Paul Boulevard. And they were supposed to vote on it. They made the vote, and they got around to Mr. Riddick. Mr. Riddick took a look at it, and he said, you know, the Nesbaum Real Estate Company is involved in this, and they are engaged in institutional racism. He said Savage and Wilcock, a very well-known law firm, is also engaged in this, and they are engaged in institutional racism, and I'm sick of it, and I'm going to vote against it. No one said anything, as they usually don't, but I did point out that it was a terrible way to run a city based upon your racial perceptions. So the answer that I'm giving Mr. Smeagol is I come back because the dead issue of black racism on city council hasn't gone away. And the question needs to be considered by the council, is black racism insidious and destructive to this council and to the city as white racism?